Hello, mental workers, and welcome back. Today, we're unpacking an experience. And the experience is this. You're knocking on the door of an employer who you really want to work for. You know you've got all the skills, all the competence, you know you can do the job. But the employer comes back to you and says, you haven't got the right degree. So what do you do next? And this, my dear listener, is what we are going to focus on. I'm going to take you through my experience, and then we're going to talk about two possible pathways. That is, accepting that you need more qualifications and you need that perfect ideal one, or rejecting that idea and what that pathway would look like. Let's start off with my experience with this. As a psychologist, there are many pathways to become qualified. I did a pathway called the 5+1 pathway. This means that I did my 4 years of undergrad, and that included an honours year. Then I did a 1-year master's in psychology, and it was called a Masters of Psychology Professional. After that, I needed to do 1,500 hours in a workplace setting to become fully qualified. I also needed to do the National Psychology exam. So here's me. During my non-clinical university studies, during that 1-year master's, I actually did a placement at a private hospital. I was doing group therapy to older adults and leading the groups on my own, as well as doing assessments and reporting to nurses and psychiatrists, working in a multidisciplinary team. After I graduated from the professional master's, I was actually offered a job at the hospital. Yay! And that was really cool. I was still working on the older adults program, but I also had an opportunity to work within the group therapy program in the general psychiatric hospital area. So I was in contact with people who were severely unwell. They had psychosis, as well as bipolar disorder, eating disorders, personality disorders, suicide attempts, severe trauma. And I was delivering group therapy to them, interpersonal group therapy, developing their personal skills, as well as giving them skills training. Again, I was working in a multidisciplinary setting, working with nurses, mental health nurses, social workers, and we all recognized our different skill sets and we were like, this is great, we're working as a team, we're utilizing each other's competence. After I did work there, I needed experience in some different areas, particularly I needed experience working with children. And so I got another job, and this job was a government-based program. And what I did was I was actually working at a different office location every day. I was working in low socioeconomic areas around the Perth metropolitan. One day I'd be in the south of Perth, the north of Perth, the east, and the west. It was nuts. And the point is, I was also working with very severely unwell clients. When they came into our clinic, they'd have to do a distress questionnaire, and they would always be scoring pretty much the max. And these were patients who were supposed to be mild to moderate in severity. They were not. It was kind of an inside joke for us that we were like, where are these mild clients? There was nobody. I remember I had one mild client the time I was working there, and I was just kind of like, what are you doing here? Like, I was bewildered to see them. And they're like, no, I just want to chat. And I was like, this is so weird. That was my experience. So I got a broad range of experience in assessment, in diagnosis, in doing interventions. I worked with children, adolescents, adults. I've worked with older adults. I've done a whole bunch of range of therapies. And this was all while I was a provisional psychologist. So remember, this is on the pathway to becoming qualified. So when I get fully qualified, I stay at that job for another 8 months. Low-key hated that job as well, not because of the clients, because of the workplace. And so I was kind of planning what I was going to do next. And during the 8 months that I stayed after I got fully qualified, I was thinking, okay, I would like to join a group practice. So this is kind of the next step for psychologists. I was already working in a team of psychologists, but it was a government-based program. And so I was like, I want to join a private psychology practice that fits with my values. And who, I've been looking at their websites and seeing their presence on social media and who I think I could gel with and who would help me further my career and who I could help contribute to their practice. It just so happens that the practices that I think aligned with my values and who I meshed with, I didn't realize this at the time, but they only employed people who had a particular degree. And that degree was a Master's of Clinical Psychology. Now, remember, I did this professional master's, which does not have the word clinical in the title. So I approached practice number 1. And just to give you a background on hiring with psychologists right now, there's a lot of demand for psychologists to be hired in practices. The word on the street was if you approach a practice, you'll pretty much be hired. They are looking for people to hire. They're having trouble hiring. Back to the story. So I approached practice number 1 and I get a rejection based on the fact that I don't have the clinical masters. I approach a few other practices who also happen to align with my values, but also only hired clinical psychologists. And I get further rejections, again, based off the fact that I don't have this clinical qualification. And then I was like, okay, let's see how I can go here. Now, another thing is that I have a PhD, and I have a PhD in sleep, in insomnia specifically. So I was like, okay, great. There's this practice that I'm really gelling with, who I think I could be a good fit for, and they're a sleep practice. So I'm like, perfect. I've got the clinical skills, I think, and then I've got the PhD qualification as well to back that up. I'm very aware of the sleep literature, as well as how to assess and do interventions and what's the best evidence-based treatment for that population. And dear listener, you know what happened next? You could probably guess. It wasn't success. It was the opposite. It was non-success. I was ejected from the sleep clinic for the same reason as the other clinics, because I didn't have that clinical qualification. So I'm sharing this with you because I'm just going to assume I'm not alone in this experience. I know, in fact, that there have been lots of other people who have gone down my pathway, or in psychology, there's the other 4+2 pathway, which is 2 years of workplace-based experience. And you also have several quite onerous requirements to APRA to do case studies and do reflections and lots of ethical-based practice. And I know for a fact that these people have applied to hospital positions, they've applied for other positions in psychology and been rejected on the same basis as me. So, of course, there's a few reactions to this. And my one was to feel inadequate. I was like, God, maybe there is something wrong. Like maybe I don't have the right competence and experience, despite having by that time acquired a few years of hospital experience and the other workplace experience that I had. Yeah, maybe there just wasn't something right with me. And so this is pathway number 1, that we accept that we're inadequate and that we need the specific qualification in order to further our careers. Pathway number 2, and this is the one that I've straddled between, is rejecting the idea that my qualification is inadequate, realizing that I actually do have the competence and that I think they're just trying to gatekeep. Yeah, there's this gated community and they just don't want my qualification, my kind of people to be involved. So I guess there's a bit of suspicion there. Let's talk about each of these possible responses and see where we can go. Because you don't have to feel inadequate to want a different degree. Perhaps you have also faced the same barrier that I have faced, and you've been like, right, I want to get the degree that will enable me to cross that line. It's not uncommon, in fact, that, and especially nowadays, that employers want these specific degrees. When I was working at the hospital, I remember there was a time when a few nurses were really, really peeved off because they had decades of experience in a particular field of nursing, but the manager wanted them to do another master's in order to have it on paper that they were qualified in the area. But they were like, I've already been working with this patient population for several decades. So again, you can be annoyed, but maybe you do just want that piece of paper so you can be like, bam, here it is. I am fully qualified. Let's explore that path. What I would recommend you first do is actually look at the evidence. Does this qualification guarantee that I will be able to get into this job that I'm looking for? And I'd also recommend you reconsider, what is it that you actually want to do in this career? So be careful not to fall for all the marketing and hype. Maybe you just actually want to be a sounding board and not see people with mental health disorders. In that case, you'd become a counsellor. A psychology qualification would be too much for you. Do you want to address social issues that affect mental health like homelessness? A social work degree would be perfect. instead of getting that clinical degree. Maybe you want to actually gain further skills in another area of psychology, nursing, OT, and it's not a clinical degree that you need, but it's a forensic degree or an occupational degree. Maybe you actually have a bit of left of field interest and you want to do a creative arts degree in order to combine that with your psychology degree, and you want to start your own private practice in paint and yoga therapy. You'd also need probably a yoga qualification for that, just FYI. So I'd ask you to take a step back and be like, what do I actually want? Am I doing this just because I want acceptance by this particular job? But is this job going to be the last job that I'm in, or is this a stepping stone? In which case, is spending 30 grand at least on another qualification the best way to go around this? If the answer is yes, then go for it. I've heard a lot of good things about people who have done the bridging course in clinical psychology, and they say it's actually really helped them further their skills. I've also heard anecdotes from other people who have said, no, I did something completely different, and they're also really happy. I guess what I'm saying is, don't just do the degree because you're feeling inadequate and you want to resolve those feelings. That's an expensive way to resolve inadequacy. And it's kind of like, I'm saying that now, but yes, I did try and get the clinical masters, but because it's so competitive, I wasn't accepted into that either. And I also had to deal with that and to be like, no, they literally only had 4 places and I don't interview that well. So I was like, okay, probably not a viable pathway for me. So let's explore the second pathway. So again, what we're talking about is that we've got our dream job up there. We're knocking on the door. We've got all the experience and the competence, and the employer is like, but you haven't got the paper. I've gone down the second pathway, which is reject and create your own space. I've rejected the feeling of inadequacy and been like, man, there's so many people in the same boat as me. I'm not alone. And I've been like, okay, well, what do I actually want? And it's true that I did want to join a group practice, but those group practices that I applied for, they were really the only ones that I thought shared my values and who I thought would actually be aligned with my interests. I have a strong research background just from having done a PhD, and I really love the scientist practitioner model, and I love people who also are really keen on formulations and treatment plans and helping clients that way. I just couldn't find any practices that fit my values in this way. And so I decided to actually start my own practice. And maybe I won't be in this practice forever. I hope not, because I do actually love connecting with other professionals. In my hospital job, teamwork was a great feature, and I really loved actually learning about everybody else's skills and using my own skills to the fullest capacity that I had. I also had to question the things that other people were saying. So when I have felt inadequate because of my qualification pathway, it's when I've seen people explicitly saying things on social media and stating that generalist psychologists, myself, are not good enough or we're lesser skilled, and implying that we're damaging and causing harm to patients. That really hurts. And I'm sure that if you're in a similar boat to me, you've also felt the pain of that hurt. What I do is ask myself, is there a reason why somebody might be saying this? Perhaps it is true, but actually, when I look at it, there's no evidence to say that people who have this particular qualification produce better clinical outcomes than people who have this other particular qualification. So until there's that evidence, we'd have to assume that they're same. There's no significant objective difference. And so maybe the reason why people are saying this is out of fear, maybe to protect themselves, maybe to keep the keys to that community. In my experience, having worked for a few different places now, thankfully, in the workplace, when I'm actually in a job with psychologists who have different qualifications, I haven't been made to feel inadequate. It's all about competence and your ability to learn quickly and do your job well. I would say we're all treated the same, which is just awesome. It's actually just getting in there, which is the issue. I've also rejected the idea that if I get a clinical master's, then that'll open up pathways to me that I can't create for myself. I think if I reflect on what I actually want out of this career pathway, I think there are alternative pathways. So until it becomes really compelling that I need the clinical masters to further it, I'm cool for now. So key takeaways for you if you want to go down this pathway of rejecting and creating your own space to actually be a good enough psychologist is actually telling yourself, my qualification is good enough. I'm competent. I'll find places where my skill set is valued or create my own place to flourish. The degree is just one part of the bigger picture of me as a professional. It's really just permission to enter the profession and the green light that you meet the bare basics to practice safely. It shouldn't be the defining part of you. What I've learned since actually becoming fully qualified is that there is so much to learn. I already knew that when I was in training, but holy crap, it's like I've been qualified for a few years now and I still feel like I've just scratched the tip of the iceberg. And another takeaway is that we actually work better together when we're not putting each other down in the profession. So if anybody is making you feel inadequate because of your career pathway, maybe don't give that much weight. Maybe actually reconsider that you have achieved competencies in certain areas. Otherwise, if we don't, we're going to fall into that imposter syndrome and we're going to be like, somebody's going to find me out for being inadequate when you're actually not. You're not inadequate. We do so much work and practice to become qualified and do the work that we do that it's just so I don't have words. It's just so inaccurate to be like you're inadequate. It's not true. So in summary, I started off with my experience where I got lots of skills in clinical areas and then was rejected from clinical practices, even the practice where I had the PhD experience. Yep. And we've got the two pathways. So we can accept that, okay, maybe I need another qualification, in which case, if you assess where you want to go in this career and you think that the qualification really is the best way for you to get where you want to be, of course, go for it. However, if you take a step back and you're like, you know what, this actually isn't for me. This is not what I want out of this career space. And I think I can get to where I want to be without getting this qualification and do things that are more meaningful to me and also save myself 30 grand. Then you can reject the idea that you need a specific type of qualification and create your own space. I know where I am now that I'm a little bit happier having rejected the notion that I'm inadequate because of the pathway that I took. I knew it was a really good pathway. I learned so much on the job and I gained heaps of experience working in all aspects of the job that when I think about my peers who have taken other pathways, I'm like, yeah, I feel really confident in a lot of aspects of this job. Whereas people who took different pathways, maybe they don't feel as confident in that particular area. I'd be interested to hear if you have any similar experiences. You can subscribe to be a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/mentalwork. You can also email me at mentalworkpodcast@gmail.com. I've been really enjoying receiving emails from you. Thank you so much. And it's been lovely to get to know you and just know that I'm actually speaking to people who are listening and not just a void of darkness. Lovely. Take care and catch you next time.